Hey there, welcome to another Tesla Motors Club podcast. My name is Lewis.
I'm Mike.
I'm Doug.
On on today's episode, we're going to be talking about some interesting updates around LiDAR and the latest in LiDAR technology. There's also some huge news in FSD beta for those of you that loves self-driving and all things self-driving. And there's a few other smaller topics we'll talk about. Episode number 27 starts now. Hey there, we're back.
We are
here. How is everyone?
Doing well, thank you.
I'm about 30 pounds heavier, but yeah.
Yeah,
Does everyone have a good Thanksgiving, hopefully?
We cheated. We went out to a restaurant. No cooking over here.
Oh, man. Yeah, that sounds like an easy... So what about leftovers, though, man? I feel like the best part of Thanksgiving is the leftovers. Not to get into a non-Tesla rant, but non-Tesla rant time, no. But it must be nice to not have to clean up and do all the cooking.
I've done the cooking for the last 5 years, and it's nice to take a break. We went out to a favorite place, had steak Diane, all the trimmings.
Nice.
Worked for me.
Well, I'm glad that worked out. I had dinner with some friends, which is what I normally do. But my brother sent me a message. And my brother tried to go to like a restaurant, and apparently they had overbooked. And He got there and he had to wait for a long time. They had booked for inside. Basically, he sends me this message. He's like, "How's your Thanksgiving?" It's like, they were supposed to put us inside, but they put us outside and it's freezing. It's outside eating in the cold. I'm like, that sounds terrible and hilarious. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, here in Southern California, you get to go outside and enjoy a little bit of weather, but it worked out for us.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with Doug. I'm also a few pounds heavier. I weighed myself today and went, oh boy.
Ooh.
We're finally finishing up all the leftovers. So we'll get back into a normal routine. Hey, Jones one. I see you in the chat. Long time listener.
That's right.
Yeah. And yes, I apologize. We are operating on Elon time. I saw your comment, Hassan. But we'll jump into it. I mean, so interesting news around LiDAR. There seems to be some there's a couple topics. I guess first we can tackle the big merger. So this happened earlier in the month. But now there's been a consolidation of LiDAR manufacturers. There's two big manufacturers. One's called Ouster, I believe, and one is called Velodyne. And I guess they quote unquote merged, but like they're keeping Velodyne the name since their New York Stock Exchange.
Velodyne is the well-known company. Everyone's known about Velodyne. If you look at any of the project cars from over the years, you see those big spinning things. Those are all Velodyne units. And then they later came up with a puck that's sort of more of a hockey puck kind of style thing. But they're probably the leader in that kind of LiDAR, which I would argue is not the kind of LiDAR that will go to consumers because it's too many moving parts and expensive. And
it's ugly. Who wants a giant thing sticking off the top of their car, right?
Well, Doug keeps talking about wanting a new camera in the front of his car, so yeah.
I don't think that's what he had in mind. Also, a spinning LiDAR on the front of your car kind of cuts off 180 degrees of usefulness.
Yeah, details.
Well, the kind of LiDAR that will be in cars should be a sort of a solid state thing that is just a nice sort of linear array. And that particular unit would only get maybe 130 degrees, but they should be cheap enough that you can put them everywhere you need them. And so that should be fine.
Yeah. And I'm sure Velodyne has those already. They're making them. Those are some of the components that are ending up.
If you look at what they have available, they were working on that kind of thing. And the other company, Ouster,
Ouster,
Oyster.
Oyster,
That's a blender company, so I don't know.
Yeah, not Oyster. It's Ouster. So Ouster, I don't know.
Okay. Anyway. If you look at what they were selling, basically the same kind of product detail. So this is sort of they're not really complementary companies in terms of, one had a particular technology and the other one had another, and that, together they expand their product line. It's really, they're doing the same stuff, and well, guess what, autonomy hasn't quite advanced as quickly as people thought. Both these companies went public a couple years ago, and had a nice, spike with their share price based on that anticipation. And as the years have gone on, and we see that, well, it's not here yet, and we don't know when it will be here. It's not quite fusion energy, but it's still taking its time. Their stock prices have gone down, along with the overall sort of global recession that may be coming. So yeah, I mean, this seemed to be like, let's join to survive, right?
An efficiency consolidation, right? They can streamline operations, basically it screws over a ton of people that work in the various departments, like, finance and HR and all those things. So you don't need overlap in those.
The redundancies,
all the redundancies, right? But at least it's good for autonomous driving and companies that are interested in LiDAR technology. It should make a single supply chain maybe more effective or cost. Although if they kind of consolidate it down to just them, they can charge whatever they want, right? Yeah. So maybe prices go up as competition goes down.
Well, that may be true, except they can't raise their prices too much because they're competing with the cameras.
That's true.
And cameras are cheap, so they have to differentiate themselves somehow.
True. And there are newer LiDAR companies these days also. I mean, Velodyne really is the legacy company, and that, they had that first sort of thing with the big heavy spinning stuff. And there are newer companies that go straight into the solid state, path. So, and that will be, the thing that will actually end up in cars. At least that's my opinion. So, they have to compete with those guys too, even though it's sort of newer guys. They don't have all that overhead of a more expensive product that they need to continue to support.
So do you think these companies have kind of got the fire lid under them after watching Elon basically chuck everything except cameras, saying cameras is what's going to make it work?
I don't know, man.
I mean, if I was in a LiDAR company, I'd be looking at that going, maybe I need to step up my game a little bit.
Well, I mean, it ultimately is price, right? It just has to be cheap. Cameras are super cheap.
Is it ultimately price, or is it ultimately safety and liability?
Oh, well, those things too, but ultimately is, I mean, there are always an engineering problem.
Spoken like a true engineer.
And engineering problems, you're trying to optimize several things at once, and it's all about, okay, what's your compromise between safety and cost, right?
Let's be clear, in a capitalistic market, cost is the number one driver. All those other things just need to be good enough.
But people may pay more for safety, right?
Yeah,
right.
Well, but cost, if you're looking at it from a company point of view, my cost, I've got a hard cost, which is the cost of the widget. Then I've got a soft cost of liability. If somebody says, I cut a penny on my LiDAR sensor and caused somebody's death, and my company is now liable, I have to pay that. That's money out of my profit. So did I really save anything? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
Well, for these to be consumer products, cost is the main barrier to get there. And yeah, I mean, I would say Elon is very stubborn, and he's he's made his blanket statements about LiDAR being a local minima or whatever, and it's a dead end, that kind of thing. But I have to hope once it's cheap enough, and once they got their vision system down, then they can start adding back in these other type of sensors to give that added safety factor, especially if they're cheap,
Right. Yeah. So R. Hassan asks, would LiDAR detectors be better at detecting road debris and stationary objects, even if they were 180 degrees forward facing? Yeah. So, I mean, it depends, obviously. And I like, Drive Electric USA even said that in his comment, right? I think it depends on who you ask. So, a lot of positives, negatives for LiDAR and camera only and other sensors. So asking us, since you are asking us, I would say that LiDAR does have the capability to see things in a way that the cameras can't. So there are certain conditions and certain objects and things that LiDAR will do a better job for.
Yeah, I
sure.
mean, obviously it depends on what the debris is, right?
Yeah.
But it depends on what it is. So I would imagine, and I don't want to put words in Mike and Doug's mouths, so I'll let them give their spiel.
Why stop now?
Why stop now? So from my perspective, if you can simplify the stack to where you have clear understanding of when to rely on the data from the various sensors, I kind of would prefer to have different types of sensors. So camera plus LiDAR plus radar, all those types of things. And if you know when to prioritize which ones under which conditions, I think that's probably your best holistic view, right? Like we have multiple senses, we have eyes, we have ears, we have whatever. And there's times where you prioritize one over another, depending on the circumstance. Can you do it entirely just with one versus the other? Yeah, probably. I mean, so. I think you could with enough advancement in sensor quality and the software and things like that. But I also think it's probably easier in some cases to have additional sensors. Do I think they're necessary? No. And do I think that adding sensors just blindly, just like, hey, let's cram sensors on, will that just make it better? Absolutely not. That can absolutely make things worse. So you just need to be intelligent in how you use them. That's kind of my spiel. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say to answer his question, right? He's saying, would it be better at detecting road debris? If it's a nice three-dimensional object, right? That's the thing that LiDAR will tell you is depth without, I mean, there's some processing, there's some calculation in there, but that's a very fast calculation. It's not, doesn't need to do any sort of learning or interpretation of an image to see depth. So if you have some box, then yeah, sure, it will see it better. You can't only have LiDAR though. LiDAR alone won't work. You need cameras to drive. Yep. I think a lot about like the early days, the DARPA Grand Challenge, and Sebastian Thurn and the Stanford team that won that competition, which was they had like a Volkswagen SUV that had those Velodyne LiDAR and cameras, and the Stanford team won. And their approach was to use the LiDAR to get a 3D representation of the road, and they had the camera overlay. And what they were able to do was use the LiDAR to label the camera image so that they could see, okay, what's the drivable road part? I mean, this was all dirt road because in the desert, but this was with minimal kind of like, I don't think this was even using any kind of machine learning type stuff. It was just sort of a direct algorithm, but it's like, okay, here's a certain contrast and color range, and LiDAR has said this is the part of the road that we can drive on, and then the camera, which was a bit faster and gives us the image, and we see sort of further down, that's what was controlling it. So those two were working together, and that was a great strategy that allowed them to win the competition. Sure. And I would like to see that going forward, that kind of thing, as opposed to, okay, all that signal is noise, as Elon and Andre Karpathy said.
Isn't that really what Volvo is working towards? Kind of mixing up the sensors and getting multiple inputs?
Well, I mean, you could argue that that's what Tesla used to do. They always didn't do LiDAR, but they had radar, and they had ultrasonic sensors, and they touted all that stuff until recently. Progressively, they've as they're solving the machine learning problem, they're just trying to make their problem simpler and cheaper. So they're tossing out those other sensors. I'm just hoping in the future that they will start adding them back in.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's there's different sensors excel at different things. When I worked in metrology in semiconductor, right, we had camera-based sensors. We had interferometers, which are somewhat similar to LiDAR. We're basically shining light on things and looking at it bounce back and using that to determine distance, right? Yeah. The thickness of things. We're doing distances and topography. So I mean, the thing there is, though, like in some materials, in some circumstances, one sensor was better than another, and a human was making that determination, right, when they would set things up. With a car, it's a difficult problem because you need to handle all things at all times. And there are some things where it's like, for example, say you do have something that goes in front of your car on the road. Well, LiDAR might see something, right? It might bounce back and say, hey, there's a thing here. And it goes, oh no, I need to emergency brake, or I need to swerve, or I need to do something. But what if that thing has no density, right? It's like, it's a sheet, it's a whatever, it's something that you should just drive right through.
Yeah, plastic
well,
bag.
you now are, do I swerve into the car next to me? Do I slam on the brakes and cause the guy behind me to rear ender, or do I just go through it? Well, you need to know what that thing is, right? Humans we see those things, we make those determinations. Oh, it's a garbage bag, I'm going to go over it. Oh, it's a box, it's a cardboard box that's empty, whatever. Like, we can figure those things out. So it's not a cut and dry, like, just always do this thing. Yeah, Drive Electric says he's had an issue with tumbleweeds. So yeah,
I had that exact situation just I don't know, just a couple of days ago on a long drive. There was a truck, I guess it had trash or recycling or something, and what I eventually figured out was a pizza box, like empty pizza box, came out and then landed right in front of me. And I had to make a quick determination there. It was flat. So,
okay.
Do I swerve or no? I just drive over it, right? It's low enough that the car is not going to hit anything.
Yeah. But FSD would have slammed on the brakes.
Well, FSD did nothing.
if it saw it at all.
FSD didn't do anything about it. But I wasn't quite sure, because that looked like a big kind of construction truck. I was like, oh, is that construction debris or whatever?
Yeah,
but
it's a cinder block.
Yeah, it's a cinder block. Is something going to stick up and take out my battery or what? But it was just a pizza box. I could safely drive over it. But it took me a while to figure out what it was and what to do. And swerving probably would have been bad with other traffic around me. So
right. And it depends on the circumstance. Sometimes we go, there's nothing around me, I'm just gonna swerve around it because I don't know what's in it, right? So there's no risk.
Play it safe.
Play it safe, right?
Computers don't know how to play it safe. But that's a judgment call. That's fuzzy logic, as they like to say. Yeah.
So sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's something that at least in my car, it's not very good at, is these real gray areas of, the human looks at it and says, oh, I can do this because, and it's got a whole list of reasons in your head. No traffic. It's dry. I'm at a safe speed. And you just go around it. No big deal. Other days you might drive over it like Doug did. No big deal. The computer doesn't think that way, generally speaking. At least my car certainly doesn't. It's very black and white. If it doesn't see it, that's one thing. But if it sees it, it probably would have slammed on the brakes or tried to do a high speed avoidance turn, which it tried once. Scared the hell out of me. But
do you swerve for squirrels?
Do I? No.
I do. I will, if it's safe. I will swerve for a squirrel.
I'm not wiping out my $60,000 car for a squirrel.
So what's funny, Doug, is you went exactly where I was going, where I was thinking of going. Is what do we get? Eventually it's going to come to a point as the system's doing more and more, where, like, right now humans have different judgment calls on where they do those things, right? If someone sees a dog or a cat or a coyote or a squirrel or whatever, like, you have wildlife go through, some people are going to stop, some people are going to swerve, and then there's some people that are going to drive right through, right, depending on the size of the animal. A bird, right? Like, if a bird goes out on the road, like, well, we know the bird's going to move, generally speaking.
If you even see it.
Not always. Sometimes. And so anyway, so it'll be interesting to see, like, as these autonomous computers take over, what are they going to do? Is it going to be a setting? Is it going to be like my Mad Max mode versus my, my
murder mode?
When I had FSD, when I actually had FSD beta, I think it was a skunk go across the road in front of me, and the car never did see it.
Sure.
I'm not sure what the sweet spot is for size versus distance, but a skunk is what the size of maybe a big cat, small dog. Never saw it. And now, granted, it was at night, which FSD seemed to have issues with anyways.
Really wouldn't see it.
So if only I had LiDAR.
How lit it is.
If I had LiDAR, I could see it.
Yeah, LiDAR probably could have seen it depending on the angle of the detector.
That brings up the ultrasonic issue, right? Because Tesla has ultrasonic. Well, they had ultrasonics and they did not see that low to the ground, right? So it maybe would see it.
It stopped for a deer. I had a deer like right in front of me.
That's kind of hard to miss.
Yeah, kind of hard to miss. But I had a previous thing with a deer like that was walking right towards the lane, and I saw it and I swerved to not hit the deer. and the deer seemed completely oblivious, and I don't think the car did anything. But in this time, and that was at highway speed. This is now like maybe more local, like 40 miles an hour, and a deer was just directly in front, and the car did at least slow down. It actually slowed down for the deer.
So it sounds like, so I just want to point out highway speed on a highway versus local driving. So is that old autopilot stuff versus modern FSD stack?
Both these were FSD because this was a but it, you know, it was like maybe 1 or 2 updates ago.
Oh, gotcha.
Where there was a deer walking out to my left. I think I sent you the video, or at least a still image of it.
You did.
And it was a road that you drive 55 on. It was the kind of road that would give you autopilot but not navigate on autopilot. And so in that case, it would be FSD beta working, and it had the FSD you know, visualization, but it didn't do anything. I don't know, maybe because it was coming from the side, I just didn't even notice it. And it was dusk. It was kind of dark, so maybe just never saw it.
Yeah, our Hanson's got the right idea. We just need to better educate deer on traffic safety. That's right.
Have you ever seen
the resources?
There are places where they build those like animal land bridges, right?
Oh yeah,
where they do.
We have one not too far from here,
and it actually works. Like animals do effectively learn, like this is an area that's safer to cross, and they don't cross the roadways as much. So I mean, that's not a.
Or it could just be natural selection.
Or dumb deer, right?
Yeah, it could be the ones that go over the land bridge live and procreate, and the rest of them die off. That's true. But either way, it's good. It's positive for us. So, so speaking on this LiDAR topic, right? Of, you know, LiDAR companies merging and all of that. There's a big announcement out of Volvo with their new cars.
There was.
So basically, the new, I guess, the EX90 and possibly other models as well. I know this model specifically, they said. They're going to start shipping LiDAR standard with their car. So I don't know. Have you looked at the Volvos at all? I know, Mike, you've been big into looking at different EVs.
So I looked at Volvo, which at the time was their recharge line. Polestar is a Volvo in disguise.
Sure.
Okay. And what I'm seeing now is we looked at Polestar. We were very impressed with the build quality and how the car was put together and just the overall package. We didn't like the interior design for us. That was literally the only reason we didn't go with a Polestar. But now I'm seeing the Polestar technology start to trickle back to Volvo. In fact, I just saw an ad today on one of the new hybrids from Volvo saying Polestar engineering. So there's starting to get a little crossover back and forth.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, Volvos for years have been known, at least when I was young,
they were known safe, to be a safe conservative.
Car, right? Yeah, they were very safe. They were usually not the nicest looking, right? It wasn't the flashy car. People were going to be like, "Look how sexy
the
this
Pulsar's
car is."
Not bad.
Very boxy. They used to be.
Yeah, somewhat boxy, but they were known to be extremely safe. And as someone in the comments said, you know, during this, you know, LiDAR is really a safety feature. It's more about safety in, you know, an enhancement, right? As Doug said, you can't have an only LiDAR autonomous vehicle. You need cameras no matter what. But LiDAR adds some level of safety. So it's interesting to see that Volvo being known for their safety concern of baking LiDAR into everything. So
yeah, see, this is where I miss Saab, because Saab had performance, looks, and safety. Yeah, of course they had some weird things going with the car, but
so we should say the LiDAR and the Volvo is from Luminar, which is, you know, another sort of LiDAR company that has various products that, you know, and they could sell that to other manufacturers as well, not just LiDAR, not just Volvo. But what's interesting is here's a manufacturer that is actually shipping a vehicle to consumers with LiDAR. I mean, I guess, you know, Faraday Future was touting that they'd have LiDAR and stuff like that, but I don't know
Faraday's not out in the wild yet.
Are they doing anything? So that's significant, because that means that this sensor is made cheap enough that it's gonna, you know, be delivered. to consumers. So that's interesting. It's also interesting that if you look at the copy for this vehicle that Volvo is selling. I mean, they have all the sensors, right? They have a ton of ultrasonics, like I think at least 3 different radars going on. They have the LiDAR, which is kind of nicely integrated with the car. It's sort of a front-facing array unit, which I believe has like 120 degrees of horizontal. Now, 25.
When you say array, and this is a technical geeky question, so I'm used to working with phased arrays. All right, where you've got software-driven diode transmitter arrays. But LiDAR is not that. LiDAR seems to have a laser with a set of mirrors. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I don't actually know what the physical makeup of this device is. Your standard LiDAR, like the Velodyne, the sort of spinning Velodyne thing, it's a single laser and a single detector. And this mechanical mirror is spinning. And so you get the spinning that gives you a horizontal sweep, and then there's also
it gives you a sweep back and forth. Sure.
So it's rastering,
but it's mechanical.
That's mechanical, right? So there are many ways you could do it, and it's sort of solid state physics. You could have you could have a laser array. You could have them phased. You could do that kind of thing to sweep a signal. You can use some electro-optical devices also, where you apply a voltage, and that changes the index of refraction. And you could steer that. So there are different ways it could be done. I don't actually know, but I would think, if a solid state solution would be, you have a linear array of lasers, because that's something you can do.
Right. Basically turn off each bit as you go.
Right. But I don't actually know. I'd like to see a breakdown of what this Luminar sensor is. It could just be, you could just have it could be mechanical too. You could have like,
I'd be surprised if it was mechanical in a car that's expecting to be on the road for 10 years, 15 years.
Right.
I mean,
that's the idea. If it's
unlikely to be.
Yeah. Right. So if you can do a completely solid state, then you're not worried about shock and vibration,
wear and tear, breakage, blah, blah, blah.
Right. And if it is solid state, then you can just, you make it in a fab, and these things, the pricing scales. I mean, you can reduce the price with scale, sort of like the limitation of mechanical hard drives versus solid state drives. Yeah. I mean, there's always going to be some base cost of this thing that has magnetic platters that have to spin, as the, I mean, you just sort of watch them the years, right? You're always going to at least spend, $30 or $50 on a hard drive. Whereas, that SSD is going to get cheaper and cheaper.
Which we've seen. I mean, the average consumer has actually seen that. I mean, SSD drives used to be very expensive for a very small amount of disk. And yet now you can go into Staples and, buy a terabyte for $50.
But even back in the mid 2000s, whatever you want to call that decade, you could just you could just draw a line and look at, okay, this crossover is going to happen here. And it pretty much did, in terms of when it made sense to go SSD. So anyway, that's just an example. So I expect that with LiDAR as well.
So I just, while you were all gabbing, so for those that don't know, so I should clarify. No. I mean, so I have a background in physics and optics a bit. Doug, even more so, was a physics optical physics guy, worked in a lot of labs and stuff. I was just curious, so I was looking at what they tend to do, and it's actually similar to what I envisioned I would probably do from the systems that I worked on. So generally it's single beam, and they do time of flight sensor array to capture the data coming back. So there's no moving parts. There's no mechanical parts.
No moving parts.
So that's usually... but I mean, sure, time of flight, that gives you the Z distance, right? But how do they get the X and Y with that?
I think what it is I think it's a wide beam. And they basically, if you think of it almost like where they do like CMOS chip arrays, where you're getting light coming in, they basically have it angled so like light coming into each sensor bucket is based on light that came back from a specific angle.
Okay,
kind of makes sense.
So that gives you a 1D
Right.
Well, I suppose you can make it XY. So you're saying just send out a burst that's wide. But then if you do that, though, then your signal is pretty low, right?
It's not going to be as accurate as the classic, you know.
Well, but how accurate does it need to be for a car?
Exactly.
I mean, we're not trying to track missiles in flight here.
Yeah, but you kind of are. You're doing 80 miles an hour, and something else might be coming at you.
Okay, so let's say the fastest car is 200 miles an hour, and missiles, Mach 2, Mach 3. So,
well, anyway, yeah, that kind of measurement can be done fairly quickly. Obviously, I mean, we use it's just, I mean, light travels at the speed of light, and the electronics are fast, so you can do that calculation fairly quickly. But to have the resolution, I'm not sure. Well, anyway.
Anyway, there are some that are MEMS. There's some that do beam steering, as you mentioned. So there's a variety.
So there are options. There are
Yeah,
options, and I'm sure plenty of patents.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so it's interesting. So someone pointed out, I think it was Stefan M pointed out, like Mercedes, has the EQS has LiDAR. So there's a bunch of Chinese OEMs. I think when you were in, where did you go? Vietnam, Doug, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't they talk about having LiDAR for their cars as well?
Sure. Yeah.
So I mean, there's going to be
being delivered with it. And I don't even think, actually none of the cars I saw were actually being shipped with LiDAR. It's camera-based stuff, but all this was in the service of ADAS, driver assistance systems. And I should point out that Volvo is doing all this stuff and then just specifically saying it's for driver assistance. It's not. They said we're not here to replace the driver. We're here to make the driver better. Okay.
For now.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, that is that's the incremental approach, right? You make it better, make it easier for the driver. You get a little bit safer, and they kind of phase them out eventually. Mm-hmm. But I think Volvo's in the realistic camp of 50 years from now, maybe you don't need a driver. They're not going, or they'll buy the tech from someone else. They're not trying to develop their own fully autonomous driving software system. There's been a lot of market cap lost over that, right? There's tons of companies.
I would almost say the phrase fully autonomous driving is toxic right now in the automotive industry. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of bad mojo going around about that.
It's almost like saying blockchain in certain circles.
Well, it's just true that fully autonomous was expected by now, and it's not quite there. And
not quite there. You're being charitable.
Yeah. Well, something interesting and somewhat wise that Martin Eberhard said a while back when Tesla was started, that you want to get into something just before it's possible. Like I think he made his money on e-readers or something, right? It was just before it was possible. Like, okay, you can get a screen cheap enough and put a battery in, and you can have a little ebook or whatever. And that was the key with Tesla also, that lithium ion batteries were just ready. Yep. Just ready. And it was a, repurposing of,
wasn't Tesla's claim to fame was figuring out the ability to mass manufacture the battery in quantity?
I
remember a lot of claim to fame.
Well, they do, but I think we had lithium batteries before Tesla, but I don't recall
we did.
Anybody making them in the huge quantities that you would need for a car.
I wouldn't say maybe by the time of the Model S, but the Roadster was still very low.
Very low volume.
And I would say at that point the claim to fame wasn't the rate or speed of manufacture. It was just packing them together and doing it safely. So directly cooling them, each cell is individually fused, so that you could have a chance of preventing and surviving thermal runaway.
If you're lucky.
I have to point out, my sister, over Thanksgiving, my sister sent me an article of here's a Tesla that was on fire, concerned because I drive a Tesla. And I was just like, oh boy. So I had to go through this it's fine.
Yeah.
That happens all the time with gas cars. It's still very low risk. Yada, yada, yada. And it's not like anyone was in the car when it caught fire. It was just
someone just had that happen at SEMA. One of the SEMA vehicles, it looked like an off-road buggy. The battery pack caught fire, and they were having to push it outside.
Yeah.
We had a lot of those for some years, like around 2010 or something around there. And they had all these people trying to do their project EVs, and typically it was because of cheap Chinese cells and bad battery management. So
we should point out that it is not because they are Chinese cells that is the problem. Is because they are cheap cells.
Well,
cheap materials.
I would say, but at the time,
yes,
China was putting out cells that the variation was high, and the quality of the cells was not good.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I remember at the time, if you wanted to do a do-it-yourself project, you had to meter every single cell and kind of figure out which ones you could package together without going too far off one end or the other.
There's high variation, and some of them weren't even getting, like, early days weren't like, you expect some nice clean Panasonic factory or whatever, and here it's more like rolling cigars, you can imagine
rolling it. Yeah. So, looks good to me.
Yeah, so that's not so great. And of course, people pushing them to their limits also. So.
I just have to say, those hand rolled cigars are fantastic. So don't knock the craft.
How the hand rolled lithium?
Yeah, the hand rolled. Don't smoke, kids. It's bad.
That's right. It's bad for you.
You don't inhale.
Well, I mean, don't let the smoke out of the chips either. It's bad too.
Right.
So.
Well, the magic smoke is what makes it work.
Got to keep it inside, though. Got to keep it inside. So, anyways. on the LiDAR topic, a few other minor things to talk about. So, Luminar, as Doug mentioned, is the company making the LiDAR for the Volvo's cars that are going to be shipping with them. The CEO, Austin Russell, had some not so friendly things to say about Tesla, about Elon, and basically, said that it's BS. There's no way. I think the words he said were, "There's no credible path without LiDAR," something like that. So
of course he's got to say that.
Yeah, I mean,
he's got widgets.
A direct competitor that sells a technology that Tesla's basically said isn't unnecessary. So,
actually, riddle me this.
A little shade thrown, though.
Oh, so you think there's going to be a difference between the consumer car that we drive now versus the big rigs, like Tesla selling? They've got their version of the big rig. Renault's got their truck that they're selling. That's a different environment when you're dealing with something that size, and you got very tight clearances when you're trying to park in a distribution center. You think they might put LiDAR back in or radar back in?
Are you implying they're going to require ultrasonic sensors for their big rig trucks?
I'm just asking.
I think Mike is still upset about this, that they're removing ultrasonic sensors.
I've been asking that question too, like in terms of the.
See, I've got friends in high places.
Well, I just mean in terms of the semi and that sort of stuff, like how much it definitely has cameras, right? Because we've seen the screen.
Well, without a doubt,
but how much
that's a lot
FSD type stuff is going to go into the semi?
I would think they would have enough for self-parking, because that's always been the bane of a truck. I mean, if you're a really good trucker, you can park, but most guys are struggling a bit.
They can't even.
Yeah, well, my Tesla is struggling a bit too.
Sorry.
Right, I'm going to auto some of my truck. Yeah.
My Tesla can barely park itself. It's got like a 50% success rate, and if you factor in how long it takes, it's much lower than me.
Like the little chirp, the roll forward, back.
It's done that, and then I've had to just quit. I'm done. I'm not doing anything else. And the car's like halfway sticking out. It's like, we're done. It didn't even like abort. It just kind of just sat there. I'm like, are you gonna do anything? What's happening?
I have to admit, I've never actually tried to use that feature for my car, just from the stories Doug has told me, and how much I paid for it. I'm just like, I'm not interested. I don't need the feature.
First, you need to even get the option to use it, right? Like, okay, I pulled along. Here's a place I can park, and then you're like, well, you're waiting for the little P, and it doesn't show.
It's
so
not
back up and go
There's
again.
not enough space, yeah.
You know,
See, I wouldn't even know what it looks like to tell you that you have the option. So,
Yeah.
well, so I was kind of blind when I walked into my first Tesla. So I get my car. I've had it like 2 days. I'm going to the supercharger. I'm going to supercharge just like the big boys do, and I go to self park the car in the super, and it just throws up. It says I can't do this, and I'm thinking in the car, what the hell's up with this? Welcome to Tesla.
Can't even self park in your own parking lot.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, man. So there's one other kind of, I don't know if it's big news, but a big thing that came out was a potential hacking concern with LiDAR. So I think it was on Hackaday about a week ago. They literally, there's a research paper that they wrote about where researchers essentially showed how you can fool a LiDAR-based system into not seeing pedestrians or other cars or whatever you want it to not see, which will obviously could lead to autonomous accidents. I do want to point out before we dig into this that it's funny that there's like, oh, look at this way that we can trick this. You can do the same thing to cameras. You can do the same thing to radar. You can do the same. So like all sensors
can be fooled,
have weaknesses in this regard. But anyway, so I don't know. Thoughts, Doug? Does this concern you for the LiDAR cars out there?
Well, it's kind of funny. Maybe it's a ray of hope against the robo apocalypse that we can kind of hide ourselves from the robots that come to kill us.
What, Skynet's not going to find you because you're going to be wearing your stealth jacket.
I wear my my RAM radar absorbing material jacket and try to hide that way. I mean, sure. I mean, you can shoot a laser at a camera and blind it. So all these things are trickable. I think what it is what it really tells you though is that multiple ways, multiple sensors, multiple ways of detecting things are important, right? Like if it's too dark, you can't see anything with the camera, then you have LiDAR. There's a guy that I think set up a projector in his garage. And so he's just projecting a screen in front of his car, and autopilot FSD is identifying all this stuff. It's just looking at a movie, right? So like you're looking at two-dimensional surface, and it thinks it's seeing stuff, right? So if it had some LiDAR information as well, I'd say, okay, this is just a brick wall. I mean, what happens when it's like the Roadrunner and the Coyote situation, where someone draws a tunnel on a brick wall? Is the car going to drive right into the brick wall? I think right now it is, right? Without radar and without sonar or ultrasonics or anything.
Right. So it's certainly a possible issue, and I agree. I think in the long term, you will have redundancies in various technologies, and so it's likely that Tesla does cameras now, and 10 years from now, 20 years from now,
redundancy is key, but redundancy costs money. And if capitalism is at play here, then that's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah. What you need is HD maps, and then you'll know exactly where you can drive. Where you can't
exactly where the fake tunnels are.
That's right.
We'll know where all the fake tunnels are. All right, sorry, we won't go down that road. But yeah, it's interesting. I think it's good that researchers are doing this work, because it will push manufacturers, hopefully. My hope is that it will push manufacturers to, one, think about redundancy, and two, make their systems more resilient. In the sense of, for example, like the basic attack, I'll just describe it a little bit, of this LiDAR, thing that they came up with, is not that they're like, it's not that they're like making fake people appear, or they're like hiding. It's literally they're sending data to the sensor that causes it to discard point cloud data it has for like a part of the field of view. So it'll go, these degrees over here, I'm getting bad data, so I got no data, just throws all data out for that angle. And so if there's a person there, it just doesn't know that it's there. So it'd be pretty easy to build, software or things that go, oh, hey, I'm missing part of my field of vision. If I'm going to be driving into that area, I should maybe slow down or tell the driver they have to take over. Something you would hope. But
Ray is saying the cameras can see solid walls. Okay, yeah, but you can just show it a movie, or and it will think it's not a solid wall. It will think the edge of your garage is the road. So you can fool it. So I think if you had a well enough painted tunnel like the coyote might have or whatever, I think I
hear a weekend project coming up here.
Yeah,
kind of mock this up and see what happens.
Someone's got to do this.
I'm gonna paint my garage door. My wife won't divorce me, I swear. Yeah, that would be funny. I mean, although realistically with cameras, and this kind of goes to where Tesla maybe needs more redundancy, is if you had stereoscopic vision, that would improve the quality of you mapping and identifying objects and being able to tell that something looks fake, right? The problem right now is you have a single camera looking, so it can't tell 2D from 3D, and it's guessing based on its all 2D.
Map. That's all it knows.
It does get 3D information by the change of the image. So it's not. It's more of a motion parallax as far as aspect stereoscopic image.
That makes sense.
Are you saying when aspect changes, that's where it picks up the 3D from?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and Tesla's even shown this where it can create it's almost like a point cloud like you would have with LiDAR, but it's created it with a car driving around a corner, and it has a sense of where something is in space, and then now you've changed its perspective. And that's essentially what stereoscopic vision is, but it's just as a temporal difference instead of a spatial difference.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so George Holtz from Comma AI, he did a rant on how Tesla basically says LiDAR is useless, and then essentially recreated LiDAR with their cameras.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
you know what I mean. And I agree. It's not really the same thing as LiDAR, but essentially, yes, they're still building a point cloud, and they're still essentially, 3D mapping an environment.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is LiDAR works in the dark.
Correct. With that, yeah.
Well, and that's crucial because my FSD did not work good in the dark. I mean, it was always flipping on the high beams, even when I turned them off. It was a constant battle.
Right. Yeah. So we'll see. Things will continue to improve. Technology will continue to advance, and we'll hopefully we get there. But on the news of FSD, speaking of all this autonomous driving, we have officially the announcement. We have a wide release of FSD beta. I wish I had like streamers or something. I could be ringing a bell. So Elon had promised this towards the beginning of this year, that by the end of the year they would have a wide release of FSD beta. I was dumbfounded for it to happen more than a month away from the end of the year, because Elon time, right? Normally it means we might do it the 24th hour of the last day of the
last month.
Yeah, right. But no, it's out. It's out today. So if you do not have FSD beta and you are interested, you have a few options.
There's a caveat. There's a caveat.
You can. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into all the problems with this, but if you don't want to spend $15,000 in buying FSD,
you can subscribe.
I would highly recommend not to. As someone who has spent, I think mine was $12,000. I would recommend not to do that. $200 to get it for a month, and you can try it out. However, Mike, why don't you explain some of the dangers of making this decision?
Oh, the list is endless. Okay, so first and foremost is, yes, you can subscribe. Yes, you can get the current beta under subscription. However, you will find if you do this, it will reduce your feature stack, because FSD is not synced to the current code release that's non-FSD. And there's been some people that have found this out the hard way, where they're on current code base, they subscribe, they pay their $199.99. And when they realize they have to delete the current stack and reinstall to get FSD beta, which is a lower feature set, they go, oh, no, cancel. I want to cancel my subscription. And Tesla says, sorry, got your money. You're good for the next month, and we won't refund your money. So they're out $199.
It's It's an
Be careful
important
what you
thing
wish
to
for.
be aware of. Yeah. So I should point out, thank you, Ray Johnson made a comment. I want the beta in Australia. Wish Elon would hurry up. So to point out, quote unquote, wide release of FSD beta at this point is North America, but I would almost argue I'm not sure that it's wide in Canada yet. I think it might just be the US, the continental US.
Yeah.
So don't flame me online when you go to try to get it and you don't have it. So at least in the US. So Canada, Alan Taylor is saying Canada is included. So excellent. I'm glad to hear that.
There you go.
Good job, Canada. Unfortunately, you did not win your game today, but we won't get into that. So I'm sorry about the World Cup. But so Canada and the US does have access to FSD beta live. So as Mike said, the software version. So we got to be clear. FSD beta currently is always several major versions behind.
Yep.
Basically, the latest and greatest branch out there is 2022.44, I believe, but most people have 2022.40 something, and FSD beta is currently on 2022.36. So if you're newer than 36, you can sign up for FSD beta, and they will give you the beta, and then they will essentially downgrade your software if you accept, and you will go from .40 or .44 back to 36.
And be prepared, because it's about a 45-minute process on a good day. It takes a long time for the beta to install, and please don't freak out. You'll hear your car making all kinds of thunks and chunks, and things turn on and things turn off. It's normal. It really is. It's a complete reload. So just let it run. Go inside, get a beer or two, come back out in an hour.
Indeed.
By the same token,
and don't drive your car after those beers.
Yeah. Well, you got self-driving now.
No.
Do not listen to Mike. Do not listen to Mike.
Please don't. If you get the beta and you decide it's not for you, the process of getting out of the beta is actually pretty straightforward. You need to send an email to Tesla. They will send back something and verify that you really are who you say you are and you want to get out, and they want the VIN number of your car. Process takes about 4 days. At least that's what it took for me. But
I think there's an even faster and easier way to get out of the beta.
Have they? Because that's what I had to do, and that was just 3 weeks ago.
You just have to violate.
Well, now, okay. You can give your little sob story in a minute. Anyway, for the normal people who just want to get out, you give them the VIN code. They will remove you from the beta. About 1 to 3 days after that, they'll push new code out to you, and your car will pop up and say, "Hey, it's time for an update." And what they will do is they will remove the software that has the beta. They'll put you back on the current code release, whatever the base code is.
And I think that you can usually do it through the app as well. I would assume you still can. You can opt out.
No, I had to opt out with email.
Interesting.
You can't even do it on the screen where you.
No. I had to send them an email. And
so
it wasn't hard. I mean, it took them a day to write back and say, "Please give us your VIN number and verify who you are." It wasn't bad.
Yeah. So, Tom Greiner asks, what new features are in build greater than 36? So the FSD peeps are missing out. The only big one that I'm aware of is the driver door unlock mode thing.
You get better charging.
Or can auto open the door right for you.
You get better charging, which I actually saw a marked improvement on the last release, which came out I got it 4 days ago. And I've seen much better charging at the different superchargers I've gone to now. They've matched the preconditioning to the charger that you selected in nav.
Okay,
which is kind of
nice.
Yes,
there's a number of bug fixes. There's minor tweaks here and there. I'll say, Apple Music is, for those that don't know, Apple Music is coming to Tesla.
It's not there yet.
It's not there yet, but that is going to be in 40.50, I think. So I'll be
very happy to get away from Spotify.
So depending on when FSD version 11 goes wide, I see a few folks asking in the chat, when does that happen? We don't know. Again, I would love it to be this year. For those that don't know, FSD 11 is the full integrated stack, so you get the new FSD on the highway as well. Right now, when you drive with Navigate on autopilot, it's the old stack. So anyway, when Apple Music comes out, if we don't upgrade right away with FSD, you might not get that for a little bit. But most of the I don't miss the features. So personally, because I don't have them, right? I've had beta. Once you have beta for a while, you don't know what you don't have, so you just kind of whatever.
Yeah.
I will point out, I do like that this FSD beta, which just went wide. I think we all got into it in the last week or 2 weeks, something like that. The energy graph is back in this one. The only way I know to get to it is to use the voice command, where you just
really
voice command. I don't know where it is in the app itself. I didn't look.
Oh,
I just hit the button and said energy graph, and it popped up.
Oh, I used the button. It's great.
Okay.
And actually, I really like it on my long trips because it lets me know when I'm, not paying attention. And it's been very accurate.
That's good that at least is in the FSD beta line as well.
Just as a record, I'm on 2022.40.4.1. And that update, that .1 update came 3 days ago.
So it's possible we may get FSD beta V11 soon, because FSD beta is 0.5. So it's 2022.40.5 as FSD beta 11. But they can also skip it. So they can skip over 0.5 and do normal people without FSD beta, and the FSD beta people don't get upgraded for a while. So we'll see.
There's one more feature. There's one more feature that you don't get in beta. And Doug's going to love this. And that's because the sexy buttons don't work right in the beta.
Oh no!
Oh no, your sexy buttons.
I mean, I've never used it, but and they're not a sponsor, so. But your sexy button stopped working, or
no. So I'm on their beta, and they've got some very cool features that only work with the current code base. That's non-beta. Like you can actually pre-charge.
Did they change some the coding?
They actually have a compatibility switch, whether you're in beta or not, because of the code level. Something changed behind the scenes, and they Joey's asking what about CCS. Yes, if you use the sexy buttons beta, it will precondition for CCS1.
But what about for just the new software? Does Tesla do it if you say that you're going to a charger? Okay.
No, it does not. I tried. It still only preconditions for supercharger. So if I type in EVgo or EA on the current nav system, it'll take me there, but it won't precondition, which is really kind of sucky.
I had a hard lesson about preconditioning recently.
Hard lesson.
Well, it's not that hard a lesson, but
you let all the smoke out of your.
I had to drive up to upstate New York, and I was coming back the next morning. So I was driving up that night, and there's a supercharger right there. I was like, well, it's late, and the supercharger's at a Trader Joe's, So I'm like, well, I'll go up in the morning, and I'll charge up, and I'll do a little shopping for my spinach, for my snacks, or whatever, for my long drive. And yeah, what I really should have done was gone ahead and charged that the night before, and then that morning drove to a further away supercharger. Because what happened was, it's morning, it's upstate New York, the car is cold soaked all night, and now I'm going to a supercharger that's a quarter mile away. And what should have been like a 20-minute charge ended up being like a 50-minute charge, I think, because the battery was cold.
Wasn't enough time to precondition.
And it was Thanksgiving morning, and
great.
Trader Joe's wasn't open anyway, so I was just sort of stuck there for an hour, and when I really should have just had.
You're right. You're right. If you don't precondition, you can take a real hit on your charging times. It's pretty eye-opening.
Yeah. So the lesson here also could have been, Doug, that you can precondition your car before you leave wherever you're leaving from. So you could have set it to say, hey, I want to charge, and preconditioned while you were sleeping, and then been ready to go when you go there.
Yeah, I just wasn't expecting any of that.
Yeah,
sure.
So, Alan Taylor had an interesting comment about the new energy graph and a prediction about it includes like wind resistance. If you got high winds. Al, you're absolutely right. It does. And even better than that is I drove it up to one of our local ski resorts, and it was within 1% of expected burn all the way up the hill. So it accurately calculated the battery usage going up 5,000 feet on the mountain. Very impressive, including the temperature drop, by the way. So. Oh yeah, that new charger is a lifesaver. Absolutely a lifesaver.
What are we commenting on?
So Alan has he's thanking me for pointing out a new charger that went into Blue Jay. There's a supercharger in Lake Arrowhead, but it's only 8 stalls. It's always really busy. Sometimes it's broken. Blue Jay is a little town that's maybe 10 minutes outside of Lake Arrowhead proper, and they put in a 50 kilowatt CCS in Chatamo, and it's like the only one they have in the whole place that's not, supercharger. And it's handy. There's a theater right next to it, and there's a burger place right next to it, so you can watch a movie, get a burger, charge your car.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, Mike is the expert of the group on superchargers, at least as far as I'm concerned, because I have never supercharged my Tesla ever. I haven't driven far enough from my house to need to, because it has 400 miles of range. So as long as that,
blah 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 blah.
Tesla Platinum. Yeah, I mean, it's he has a wealth of information that he puts out about the superchargers, which I find useful for when I do make some road trips. It'll definitely help me out. So I do want to touch on, there was another big update, or supposed update in the surprise update, a new feature of the FSD beta. So the FSD beta 3.1 that we all have. So it's 10.69.3.1, which is on the normal software version of 2022,
right,
36. Whatever, right? So
what?
So basically, all those numbers, all it means is now it seems that Tesla started putting in code to detect people who are using devices to cheat the system in understanding.
No water bottles.
So they're starting to detect that you're using your weights. They're starting to detect that you're using your water bottles, your things, to try to cheat the system that tries to get you to grab the wheel. The safety. We'll say the safety almost an interlock, but not really feature. So if they catch you using one, they will give you a strike, and then you can get kicked out.
How do you think they're doing it? Is it that there's a constant torque?
I would say constant
have a stationary mass,
or
probably
are they using the camera to see?
Okay, so that's. I'm wondering if it's camera related, because I've had a couple long trips recently, and I did get dinged a couple times. And
so speaking of being kicked out of the beta,
I don't know.
I was trying to keep him out of trouble.
I don't want to go through all of that, but yeah, I mean that's yeah. But what I noticed was that I think I was on a phone call, and I kind of use my hands when I talk, even though nobody's watching. And the thing only wants you to touch the wheel every now and then. And what I had found, that I felt like the car is giving you less frequent, bugging you less frequently with the beta. And I think because it can tell you're looking forward.
I'll agree with that.
So it's not bugging you as often. But
Tom, fantastic comment. Fantastic comment, Tom.
But so it's not bugging you as often. But anyway, so I'm on a call, and I'm kind of talking with my hands, and then there wasn't even a warning. It was just like, autopilot disabled for the rest of the ride, and it's like, really? Already? So that seemed a bit harsh. But I seem to think it's the cameras, and yeah, I've had a lot of long drives recently, and I tripped number 5 apparently. I was hoping that it was within the last month, because within the app, I only had like whatever one. But it's kind of, on a long trip, it's kind of easy to get a ding, because you're sitting there with your hand on the steering wheel, and and I don't know. Sometimes it alerts even though your hand's on the steering wheel, and if you're just at hour 15 or whatever, you're just looking at the road, you might miss their complaining. I'm looking at the road, not the cars complaining. But
right.
Anyway, I think it must be the camera. So I did try just as an experiment, like, okay, what happens if I block the camera? And it won't let you even engage
right
autopilot.
Yeah, they
really?
disabled that a few months ago. You can't use FSD beta at all if you block the camera. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure the camera is certainly a factor, and there's different ways they could do it. But just be aware, folks, if you try to defeat the system and they detect you, they will kick you out potentially. And it's kind of sad to say it's a wide release, but it's still a beta, so they can still revoke your access. So keep that in mind as well. If you pay the $200 or the $15,000 and you get into the beta and then you violate their thing too many times, I think it's 5 strikes, then boom, you're kicked out. Now there is a rumor going that once version 11 comes out, which maybe we'll get by the end of this year, version 11 actually removes the permanent strike system. So where basically it'll probably just say, normally when you violate it and you have a forced disengagement, it just says, hey, you can't use it for the rest of this trip, which really means pull over to the side of the road, stop, park,
put it in park.
Then you can, then go out of park again and you can turn it back on. So that at least will be fair. I think that's a fair thing to do is like, okay, you can't use it for this trip because you haven't been safe. But to say, oh no, you paid $15,000 and now you can't use the beta at all for the next X months because we've decided, you tripped it. That's that's a bit unfortunate, but anyway, so hopefully it goes away soon, but until then, yeah, let's just be aware that that's a thing. Got a lot of comments coming in here.
Yeah.
FSD beta and defeating devices are a very popular topic. But yeah, so it looks like we answered a few of these. So no, you can't block the camera. Let's see. Yeah, sometimes it does have false detections. I've had that too, Doug, where I was on a call, but like I was one hand on the wheel, and I had one hand where I was holding a phone, but it was a speakerphone, so I just was like holding the phone off to the side, and it was going bananas at me.
Yeah,
like,
you don't want the
hey,
phone.
You're on the phone, and I'm like, well,
yeah,
I am, but I'm not. But I get it. And
I had a friend with me on one of these long drives, and what were you doing? She was doing like trivia or something, and so and it's off her phone, so she's holding her phone up, and the road noise is kind of terrible in the mall through, at least on this particular road. So she has the phone up, and it's kind of close to me, but it started giving. Obviously, I'm not holding it, but it started giving warnings about pay attention, even though I'm looking at the road, thinking I'm holding the phone.
Right.
When I'm not.
Right.
So it's not that smart. It needs to be a little smarter.
Yeah,
I've had
Joey
other.
Says,
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, Joey says, he said, I keep yanking it out of autopilot, trying to acknowledge the system. I just turned autopilot off and gave up. It was making me drive dangerously. Yeah, it can be very tricky, especially at first when you're new to the system. I know I ran into that where I had a forced disengagement because I didn't understand what it wanted me to do. I'm like, I'm paying attention. I'm holding the wheel. What's the problem? But yeah, sometimes you feel like you really have to torque it, and you torque it so much it disengages, and then you look like a jackass swerving on the road.
And sometimes it's asking for more input. Like I'm holding the wheel, and then it's blinking. Okay, so I kind of move the wheel a little bit, and it fights you really. It's like, okay, how much do you want? And sometimes even rolling the volume roller,
little adjustment wheels don't do it.
Sometimes it doesn't do it. I don't know. I just have to disengage it and then re-engage it, which is kind of nuts. Yeah. I've also had some issues where the FSD will just slow down in the middle of the road because I guess it wanted to take an exit and it missed the exit. Okay, you missed the exit. All right. But it's still slowing down. I'm like, okay, but you got to keep going now. And so I'm having to step on the accelerator to keep it going. And I'm like waiting for the nav to update to give a new route. And somehow they're just both lagged and they're not quite communicating with each other. and I've gotten dinged for like messing with the nav. Right? I mean, I can still see the road. I can still see the road, but it maybe because my head is turned, and it will give me a forced disengagement for not paying attention to the road.
Yeah,
even though I am. But
yeah,
I'm messing with its errors, right? I'm trying to overcome its problems.
Right. It's certainly one of the challenges of FSD, besides the FSD part, is the attention of the occupant part, right? Of it trying to be clear that you're paying attention or not. It's hard to figure that out. They can only put so many cycles towards that because they need most of the resources towards how well it drives. So I'm sure it'll be a system that evolves over time and hopefully gets better. But there's some things to be wanting at the moment. Yeah, so that's pretty much it for all the new FSD news. We'll certainly have some more takes on it at the coming weeks as we get to play with the newer version more. I haven't gotten to use it much since it just recently came out. But yeah, we'll definitely give some more takes there. Hopefully V11 soon. That will be fantastic. Maybe next month. The last thing I wanted to point out, to not get too deep into I'm trying to stay away from Twitter because I don't like the topic of Twitter. I already stay away from Twitter. I'm not a social media person, but the topic of Twitter is that, basically some news came out that Gwen Shotwell is basically kind of more directly overseeing the Starship project at SpaceX. And it basically seems like it's likely because Elon is tied up with Twitter stuff. He's not getting to spend as much time on his other companies' projects. I would say probably Twitter/Tesla is taking up most of his cycles. So, yeah, anyway, so it looks like SpaceX's management is kind of stepping in a bit.
So the real question is, can we get a Gwen Shotwell for Tesla?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question because obviously, I mean, it would be a question of, can you get a Gwen Shotwell in general for most things, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, she's for those that don't know, Gwen is the COO of SpaceX. And a good COO is rare in my mind. I've met a number of COOs. So I've met a few good ones. I've met a number that aren't so great. And it's one of those roles that it's kind of like, depending on the CEO, you can have different types of COOs. And she's the type of COO that can really run the company, that really can drive these projects.
It's interesting. I think she started in sales.
Interesting.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
In terms of selling launch capacity to customers before SpaceX could even really deliver any. So
interesting. That's a bit of a pivot. Normally, when you, at least again in my experience, when you have a really strong COO like running the company, doing day-to-day operations, it's because the CEO is very sales focused. It's not normally the same person doing both. So it's but anyway, so she just has a sales background. But yeah, it would be great if Tesla could get someone like that to drive Tesla projects and things, since Elon has limited time and he's now tied up in Twitter things.
Distractions.
But anyway, there's always distractions.
I had a comment I wanted to. We have a few viewer comments and on the forum I wanted to highlight. Let me see. Share this. So this was in regards to the removal of ultrasonic sensors. We recently released a clip of a podcast we did some weeks ago, but we recently just put out a clip, and it's James Locke talking about Tesla removing the ultrasonic sensors and the radar. And we have had comments on that also, and one comment I thought was worth bringing up. This was Undecided 2, who is thankfully a supporting member. Thank you for being a supporting member. He said, and this is in regards to the ultrasonic sensors being gone, and then just using cameras alone to give us that near proximity sensor that the ultrasonic sensors provided. And he says, cameras do not work at night in unlit conditions. I deliberately pulled into my driveway with a couple of centimeters to spare from the left-hand side front next to a post, and no warnings. Pulled up alongside the fence and no more than 10 centimeters from the passenger door. No warnings. The cameras are useless during nighttime when there's no external light sources. Yeah, that's true.
Agree.
Right there with you.
So I don't know. I don't know what I like we were saying. I think the long-term goal should be that those sensors come back once they work out the stack. But like the hardware. Actually, let me continue his comment. He says there's no way firmware can be upgraded to compensate for hardware inadequacies. Yeah. Like if they stuck some kind of infrared LED or some kind of illumination on the side, but those side cameras have no illumination, right? So,
well,
so I do want to quickly point out that oftentimes software is used to compensate for hardware inadequacies. However, in this case, I do agree with you that if the cameras physically can't see anything, there's no amount of software that's going to enable them to see something.
Well, let's add to that. So you were just talking about the side cameras. So unless you've got one of the very newer Tesla, like the Ys or the 3s, for example, your side cameras are going to leak light every time you hit the blinker. Now, there's no software I'm aware of that's going to fix that problem, because you've got a light source that's blowing out everything that the sensor's seeing. Tesla's fix is to replace the cameras, but they're going to charge you for it. It's not a bug in their mind.
Yeah, I would. That's annoying, but I would argue that at least 50% of the time when your blinker is on, the camera is working properly. So maybe it's okay as far as the computer is
during the day. It's fine, but at night that amber just completely whites out the upper third of the
sensor.
But
it's watching. I mean, the light is flashing, right? So it's also watching when the light is not on. So that part of the data is useful.
All right. You're stretching, but all right.
No, I mean, I would assume so. I mean, most of the time it's looking and you don't have the blinker on, right? The amber is not on constantly, right?
Right.
So
it's not. Murphy's Law, though. Murphy will bite you in the butt right there.
Do I want that replaced for free? Yeah. Does it annoy the heck out of me? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it is what it is.
Yeah, Joey commented, he said, I think when they upgraded the frame rate, they decreased the effective ISO, I should say, and they work more poorly in low light, hence the 4 p.m. to 4 a.m. ban. Or that's not 4 p.m. What is that, 9 p.m.
I think it was 10. What it actually is,
oh,
must
10.
Have a shift key. It's 10 to 4 a.m. It's not a ban. It's just that what they've done is for your safety score, if you're even if you're using autopilot, your safety score is reduced if you're driving a lot between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. I would guess that has to do with statistics more than, or does it? Is it because you think FSD is, or the autopilot is less functional at that time, or is it that's when you get hit by a drunk driver?
I would say it's possibly both. FSD is definitely less functional when it's dark out, right?
Amen.
So that's a given. Now beyond that, statistics on accidents and other things, I don't know. Like, I'm sure more accidents happen during the day just because there's way more traffic and driving during the day. However, if you looked at accidents per
car on the road
at night, it probably happens more, or at least like bad accidents probably happen more, or whatever, right? That would be my assumption. I don't know the statistics on that. I haven't looked at it.
I don't either.
But it seems plausible. So there's probably multiple reasons that they do that. But anyway, it's an interesting point. And yeah, we'll see how things go. But yeah, I think we're all in agreement. More sensors in the future is probably going to happen, or probably should happen. That doesn't mean it will happen. Yeah, we'll hopefully get version 11 later this year and see how that goes. That would be exciting. Were there any other comments you wanted to cover?
Well, just you mentioned version 11. I don't even remember if we mentioned that hopefully all this getting kicked out will go away with version 11.
Yes, yeah, I did mention that. So yeah, we'll hopefully that'll end soon. And yeah, I don't know. We'll version 11, please. I would like that version 11. But yeah, so that's it for today's show. Again, we just want to thank everyone who participated in the live stream, in the chat. We always appreciate the comments and the feedback. As always, if you liked what you saw, please feel free to like and subscribe, hit the bell. If you want to support Tesla Motors Club in general, you can become a supporting member on forums or on the website. And thanks to Danny and Adam and James and all those behind the scenes that are helping make this happen. Feel free to reach out, questions, comments, whatever. You can post on the YouTube videos. You can post on the TMC site, and we'll happily respond. But otherwise, until next time, this is episode 27. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you.
Laters.